In this exercise, we're going to be looking at the difference between light and shadow and paying attention to the subtlety of the shapes that the shadows make. So we're going to start out with a sphere, and I'm going to start that with a circle here, drawn from the shoulder. So you're swinging from the shoulder to get that big circle, putting in a little bit of this background that I see in the image. That's about where the table and wall meet. The shadow of this sphere is going to be an ellipse. So I'm going to lay that in roughly the way I see it in the image. And this is the basis for my light and shadow situation. Now I need to figure out where the light divides from the shadow on this sphere. And it seems to happen along an ellipse that arcs downwards like that. We'll define some of these other shadowy spots like the front of the table there, some of that background. So now I'm going to firm up the shapes, and this is what I'll do in a drawing as well. So I can almost imagine this as being my gesture or my block in. And now I'm going to focus on the shapes that the shadows are making. So anything that's in shadow, all is part of the same shape. So for this sphere, it stops there. And then I start picking up there in the cast shadow. And there in the cast shadow. Okay, and now I'm going to pay attention to where the light and shadow separate on the ball, which is very easy in a sphere. This gets much more complicated with more complex things, obviously. So those are the shapes of the shadows. We'll firm this one up for the table. Put a little sense of the tabletop there. So now I'm going to go about filling these in. The important part of filling these shadow shapes in is that I do it evenly and lightly. Everything needs one pass of value here. And by value, I mean how light or dark a thing is. Whenever you hear value in drawing, you should immediately think about light and dark. How light is it? How dark is it? That's the value. And when I say one pass of value, I just mean everything gets the same level of charcoal. I'm not separating here into what's darker than what's lighter than what. It all just gets one even pass, as even as I can make it. You'll notice I'm holding the pencil far away here, sort of backed up off the pencil. That will allow me to make a more even mark. If I have a well-sharpened pencil and I hold it back like this and low to the paper, I can get some nice even marks out of it. If I'm not careful and I have a dull pencil, this can get very rough and very distracting, and I want to avoid that. I'm treating this shape. This is the shadow that's being cast onto the table, and we'll talk about that more in depth later. That shape that's flat on the table and the shape of the shadow side of the ball just join together in this drawing. They're not separate. They're both in the shadow. They both join together in this way. This is kind of a meditation time where I can just slowly add value in carefully. Let my mind wander. Think about that awesome comeback I should have said when I was 13 and got in an argument. This is the first step in shading the drawing. I'm not going to do any actual shading here, where you smooth out the transitions and try to make everything as light and dark as it appears to be. I'm just exploring these shapes of shadow, and that's it. And you'll notice there's a decent sense of the light source in the image just based on the shapes of the shadows, if you put them in carefully and observe them well. And then I'll just fill in the bottom here, front of the table real quick. I don't know if you can see it here, but I'm actually just going to use my thumb on the edge of the sketchbook. My pencil kept falling off the page and it was getting obnoxious. So now I'm just sort of running my thumb along with it. Okay, and that is it for this. The shadow shapes, they're going to happen on top of a drawing that you've already blocked in lines, the contour line drawing. It's the first step in describing the difference between light and shadow. Because of that, it's very important that you pay attention to where the light ends and the shadow begins. Constantly be asking yourself that question. Where does the light end and the shadow begin? What shape should that be? On more complicated objects, it becomes quite a decision-making process. On simple objects like a sphere, a single arced line is perfectly fine.